Thank you, Julio. Good evening, everyone. Man, we see so many familiar faces. I can't believe it's been 1 year since we did this before. So thank you all for being here, and for those of you who've been here before, welcome back, okay? My job is to introduce our two speakers here tonight. They're both judges, Denise Beamer and John Beamer. Brother and sister, I think. Is that? They're married, okay? Well, and we're going to talk about them in just a minute. But they're going to be speaking to us about, and they've got a lot of experience in this topic, domestic violence, not necessarily from personal experience, but they both currently preside in, Judge Denise Beamer presides in a domestic violence division. She handles that issue every single day. Judge John Beamer has previously been in a domestic relations division, which handled divorces as well as domestic violence components as well. And we're going to tell you a little bit about them here today, okay? You can take a quick look. Both Judges Beamer here are true public servants. I'm not going to parrot to you what you can see on the Ninth Circuit website, but they truly enjoy giving back to the community, and they do an awful lot for the Ninth Circuit, both Orange and Osceola counties. But I want to tell you a little bit about them personally. You already know they're husband and wife, right? They have quite a few things in common, and it's interesting. We know from a very young age they were both very hard workers. That continues today, okay? But for example, Judge Denise Beamer here, her parents emigrated from Korea. She was born and raised primarily in West Palm Beach. And as a young child, her parents owned a dry cleaning company. And as a young child, she pitched in, and I listened to an interview she did, and her school bus when she was young didn't take her home. It just took her to the dry cleaners, okay? And she would work there with her mother and father. And this is an interesting fact. For those of you who know anything about dry cleaners, you get these hangers and they have these foam things on them, right? Okay, well, she'll tell you in great detail that those hangers don't come like that, okay? Her father generously paid her a penny for each hanger she hung or put the foam thing on to protect the clothing. And I just find that so funny. So, hey, Dad, here's 100. Thanks, honey, here's $1. A penny per hanger. But no, she has a fantastic work ethic from a young age. In common with her husband, John. Okay? John's dad, when he was a young man, had a paper route, believe it or not. And this is when he was in high school, I believe. John would get up every morning at 5 a.m., help his father deliver papers. He, I believe, was on the cross-country team at his high school. He'd come home from delivering papers, 5 a.m., get ready for school, go to school, run 10 to 12 miles for cross-country practice after school, come home, eat, do homework, and get ready to go, okay? Both extremely, extremely hard workers. They also both know their way around a courtroom. Both of them have significant experience as attorneys, trial attorneys. Judge Denise Beamer, she worked right out of law school at the state attorney's office in Miami-Dade County, the largest state attorney's office in the state of Florida. From there, she went to the attorney general's office, prosecuting consumer rights cases, I believe. And then I believe in 2019, she was appointed to circuit judge. Is that right, 2019? Okay. Judge John Beamer out of law school, did litigation in the area of workers' comp. Became an in-house attorney for Farmers Insurance Company, and I know from personal experience there, as an insurance defense attorney, you spend an awful lot of time in the courtroom picking juries and trying cases. So they certainly have that in common as well. They also have something in common. They have three fantastic, adorable children together. They are upstairs right now with their babysitter and waiting on mom and dad to pick them up, okay? A couple things they don't have in common, then we'll get them up here. In terms of education, I'd side with Mrs. Judge Beamer, Denise over there. She got her undergraduate degree from the University of Florida, okay? I don't think there's much dispute that it's a fantastic university. Judge John Beamer got his undergraduate degree on a cross-country scholarship, mind you, from Austin Peay University. There's some extra credit here if any of you can tell me, where is Austin Peay University located? I'm sorry? Who says Tennessee? Fantastic. Clarksville? Clarksville, Tennessee. Okay, double extra credit if you know their mascot. Where's Charmaine Rivers? You know their mascot? You want to take a guess? A safe guess for mascot is Bulldog, but that's wrong here. Okay. Anybody? They're the Governors. They're the Governors, okay. So they have that there, and I'm only kidding around. But I need to get them up here, but they're fantastic individuals. We are very fortunate to have them here in the Ninth Circuit. Lovely people. And please help me welcome Judge Denise Beamer and Judge John Beamer, okay?
Well, thank you so much. That was such a kind introduction. Judge Egan really did listen to the audio podcast. I'm so surprised. I definitely learned the art of negotiation at a very young age because I realized $1 for 100 of those hangers was just not fair and just compensation. So it was the perfect lesson from a young age of hard work. And so it really, at the time I complained a lot. I was sometimes embarrassed, but it really was the best way to grow up, I think, and to really learn that there's honor in hard work, and it really taught me a great work ethic.
So one of the things that Judge Egan left out, and thankfully so, but if you do go on Facebook and see anything on the Ninth Circuit and search way back when, you'll probably find a picture of an adorable younger me in a dance outfit. Because when I grew up, my parents both worked 2 jobs at certain times, and so I would go with Dad to a men's clothing store at night where he was a manager and he sold insurance during the day. My mom worked at what at Siemens, used to be Texas Instruments, and at night she was a dance teacher, so I got to dance, ballet, tap, and jazz. So I like to throw that out just for some self-deprecating humor every once in a while. And the reason that Austin Peay is the Governor's is because Austin Peay was the governor in Tennessee. He was actually governor during the Scopes trial when there was an argument between teaching evolution in school versus creationism. I guess that's one of his, his claim to fame. But that's probably one of the things he's most recognized for.
But I am a Florida Gator. He is a Tennessee Vols fan, so it gets really sticky during the fall whenever they play in the football games and our kids are torn. They identify as they're half Korean and half Tennessee. So that is how they identify, and so it is always a struggle, but we're so proud. It is an honor to be here to address you all. I recognize some of the faces. I've had some court reporters and also some interpreters, so it's really great to see you. It's been a while since I've had the opportunity to do some jury trials and jury work, but it's been about 6 years as a circuit court judge. I had the honor of serving in the criminal felony division, and then from there I went to the civil division. Civil covers any kind of money judgment, slip and fall, car accidents, Morgan & Morgan, Dan Newland. Those were a lot of the bulk of the cases, but it also included breach of contract, business disputes, construction. I learned all about cement and how slow it dries, and all kinds of areas in land use and everything like that. And now I preside over the domestic violence division.
So I was appointed in 2020. I started out in the domestic relations division, handling everything that's involved with a divorce or child custody issues. Sometimes when the Department of Revenue gets involved, there are paternity cases. Domestic violence in some of those instances can be a component of those cases. I always found it strange sometimes because for all intents and purposes, we are a branch of government. And in these instances, in some of the most intimate areas of your life, you're asking the government to step in and help navigate through some of these problems. So it is a very big responsibility. But I was transitioned out to Osceola County. I now preside over a circuit criminal division where we handle felonies, and that's anything that is punishable by a year in the Department of Corrections, all the way up to cases involving the death penalty. So some very serious crimes, some very serious consequences that can arise from those. We deal with victims, and we also deal with domestic violence in a criminal aspect. I think today we're going to focus mainly on the civil aspect, and I'll touch a little bit on the criminal aspect to kind of give you all an idea of how those can bleed over in certain instances and the different ramifications and what can come about in some of those different cases.
So we want this to be as interactive as possible. We hope to ask a lot of questions. We would love your feedback. We would love your questions as well. I also have brought something to incentivize the discussion, and that includes candy, mainly my kids' Easter candy that I need to get out of the house. So if you answer a question, please, I would love to give you a piece of candy and encourage your participation. Also, obviously, we can't give any legal advice. Let me just put out my lawyer hat for a moment and tell you all the disclaimer, but because we are judges, we can't give out any legal advice or talk about any pending cases or future cases that may come before us that would be in violation of our judicial ethics, but we can talk about things in a hypothetical situation and those types of settings. Also, we are tackling a very serious issue, so please don't construe our lightness or any kind of laughter or any humor that we inject into our presentation. Please don't construe it as us not being sensitive about domestic violence, because it affects almost every aspect of people's lives. And we'll get into some of the statistics, but it is a very serious topic that affects all communities, all individuals of every race, every socioeconomic background. And so we will be talking about some potentially sensitive issues that may draw some memories of past or family or friends that you know of. I remember doing jury selection in a criminal case. We were in a courtroom like this. There were about 60 individuals there, and the prosecutor asked, who here has had a friend, family, or close friend or family member experience or be a part of domestic violence? And about 75% of the folks raised their hands. And it was at that point that I realized that this is something that touches almost every person's life, whether it be their family or friends or even in the community that we know of. So I just wanted to put that out there and tell you and give you that warning ahead of time.
And also, as we go through the program, we're going to be giving you all some hypothetical situations, some make-believe situations. The names, places, dates have been changed to protect those. No, I'm just kidding. These are not based on any of the real cases that we have that are pending in front of us, but they are scenarios that we've creatively come up with to give you all kind of a flavor or an idea of what it's like from our perspective as a judge and the things that we have to deal with, the decisions that we have to make. But they're not based on any cases. There may be some things that are similar from one case brought together with another, and things that we've seen just throughout our experience as judges. But again, we do recognize that that it is a very sensitive topic, and sometimes we'll inject, obviously, laughter and stuff. And that's because sometimes you do have to laugh to keep from crying. It is a very heavy topic, and it kind of helps, at least me, sometimes to lighten the load of that emotional component of the cases.
So we want to start off with just some of the things that we've seen in the news. And I have some photographs, and I wanted to see if anyone recognized any of the individuals that you see here, right? So I'm going to start with the folks on the right side. Okay, on the right side, they're a little fuzzy. My kids, we have 3 kids under the age of 10, so please, God help us. But our 3 kids always say our movies that I liked as a kid are fuzzy. Like, why are the pictures so fuzzy and the movies so fuzzy? They're used to high definition everything.
They don't know about beta version VCR.
Yeah.
And happen to rewind it before you took it back to Blockbuster.
Yeah. But the folks on the right side, does anyone know who those individuals are or recognize any of those individuals? Yes. And I'm talking about these individuals.
Yeah, that's Lorena Monavid.
That's right. That's right. Let me, No, she's absolutely right. And this is going back, that was 1993 when that whole situation came to light. Does anyone remember what happened with Lorena Bobbitt? Okay, so for the young people in the room, Lorena Bobbitt was a woman who I think there were a lot of jokes made about the situation. Jay Leno, David Letterman, they would talk about this case and make jokes and make light of the situation. But what I didn't know, and now I know, is that Lorena Bobbitt was actually a victim of domestic violence for a long time at the hands of her husband. She alleged, it's her position, that she had a long history of a marriage with just domestic violence, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. On that fateful night, she says that her husband, John Bobbitt, raped her. She lost control, so while he was sleeping, she took a knife and cut off his penis and fled from the home. So as she was driving, she doesn't remember what happened. She has no memory of the incident, but they ultimately find the part, and the part is returned to the husband, and they are no longer together. So there were trials.
Well, she and he are no longer together.
Right. Yeah. So, so she went on trial first because he was charged with rape. And at that time, I think in Virginia, it was marital rape. It was something to that criminal charge. She was found not guilty for reasons of insanity because she doesn't remember what happened. Then he went on trial for domestic violence. And then she went on trial, for the malicious mutilation of what happened, and he was found not guilty. Now, today, she goes by her maiden name, and she runs a nonprofit to assist domestic violence victims. And she claims to this day, because they just did a documentary about her, but she claims to this day that the ex-husband still sends birthday cards and messages through the mail. And she says it's a way of keeping tabs on her and to exercise dominance and control. But this is a case I think a lot of people made light of in the 90s, and I can completely understand, but when we pull back the curtains, we can see that, this is a famous case that has happened.
And, I mean, everyone, I think, obviously knows the famous picture on the, right-hand side of the screen. This is when Johnny Cochran had the gloves and had Mr. Simpson try them on. His famous closing argument line, if the glove don't fit, you must acquit. Everybody's heard that over and over. But what we know from past interviews and stuff that even after O.J. and Nicole had split up, they'd had a long history of domestic violence that was silent. And that happens quite a bit. Victims that suffer in silence. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the cycle of violence and the different aspects of a relationship. But nobody really knew about that stuff. Really back when he was playing football, it was one of the things that was kept quiet. I mean, when the juice was loose, everybody loved him when he was playing football and he was winning. But then when those darker moments came to light, I mean, we obviously know what happened. I think everybody has an opinion as to the outcome of that case. But ultimately, O.J. Simpson was found not guilty of her murder and the murder of Ron Goldman. But that's just an example of how these things can escalate from just like a smoldering fire up until the point where everything is burned down.
Here are some more famous cases, and you'll see some of the couples. Okay, does anyone recognize who the individuals are at the top right? That's right, Ike and Tina Turner. That is a well-known older case, I think back in the 70s. For the younger folks, Ike was a band member of the famous Tina Turner, right? And they were married and had a very tumultuous relationship, full of physical abuse, alleged sexual abuse. I think Tina Turner came out in the 80s and actually talked about it in the news, and that was one of the first times that a woman had come forward or a victim of domestic violence had come forward and really put the spotlight on that particular issue. Does anyone know the folks at the bottom? Right. So, now, some of you, does anybody know why I put them on there? Well, so I don't know if you all remember, but in 2009 in Windermere, remember, they had come out that Tiger Woods had run he got into his car in the middle of the night, driving off, ran into a fire hydrant or a palm tree, the car crashed, and when the police got there, they noticed that the wife, Miss Ellen Norman, was the windows of Tiger Woods' back SUV were broken out and shattered. And it was alleged that she had taken a golf club and smashed in the back windows. And so people were curious as to why, and then I think 2 days later it came out with all of the alleged, the cheating that had gone on with other mistresses. And it was speculated that was the reason why that this incident had happened. But if you think about it, and we'll talk about the definition of domestic violence, it does fit that situation. When the police went to investigate and talk to Tiger Woods and talk to his wife, they refused to comment. They never talked about it, and no one was ever prosecuted on a criminal basis or on a civil basis.
And then we have Mr. Mel Gibson Riggs from Lethal Weapon and Mad Max. In 2010, he was accused of slapping his then girlfriend and the mother of his child. This ended up being a criminal prosecution against Mel Gibson. He ultimately was placed on probation for it. But again, this is just how this particular topic really transcends not just race, socioeconomic classes. I mean, obviously, these are individuals who are famous that we see on the news, sometimes in our homes, on the television. But it also bleeds over from not just the civil side of things, which we'll get into the remedies of that, but as I said before, the criminal side of it, where you can actually face jail time, prison time, probation, but very significant constraints on your liberty.
All right, so when we talk about domestic violence, what exactly is the definition? As judges, really, it's all about what the statute, what the law says, and what exactly is the definition. So Florida Statute 741.28 defines domestic violence to mean a bunch of different potential crimes, okay? That group is potentially assault, aggravated assault, battery. Battery is a touching. So if I touch John, my husband, and he doesn't want me to touch him, that's a battery. This can be a battery if he doesn't consent to it, all right? And assault is if I were to take my fist and go like this and I have the present ability I'm about to hit him and he's in fear, that's assault.
Or if somebody has a gun in their waistband and they lift their shirt in a threatening manner, and they have the present ability to then use that gun, that can also be an aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
But that's the difference between assault and battery. And I think in normal news or when people speak, they interchange those two, but legally there are very different definitions. So domestic violence could be assault, it could be battery, sexual battery, that's what we know as rape or different types of rape. Stalking, we'll get into that a little bit, aggravated stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, or any criminal offense resulting in the physical injury or death of one family or household member. Now, the reason why I highlighted family or household member is what takes domestic violence and puts it in a special place in the law. So around the 80s, the Florida said we need to do something about domestic violence. It's really affecting things. We need to create divisions, specific divisions to handle domestic violence cases. So in some circuits, they have a special domestic violence criminal division where that judge and the prosecutor and the defense attorneys only handle domestic violence cases. And so a family or household member could be obviously a husband and wife. Do you think it involves a father and a son? Right. Do you think it could involve brother versus sister? Yeah.
What about ex-husband, ex-wife that don't live together? Exactly. It doesn't require that you actually live in the same household, but the definition includes these categories, spouses, and some of them seem very self-explanatory, spouses, husbands and wives, boyfriend, girlfriend, but then when you think about other aspects of it, you don't even have to be married to have to be a household member in a domestic violence case. If you have a child in common with someone and you've never been married to that person, you don't even live together. You may not have ever lived together, but you can still be a party in a domestic violence case as a household member.
So we briefly talked about the statistics and how it affects every household, but here's what the numbers really say. They believe 1 in 3 women have been victims of domestic violence. I mean, so statistically speaking, we have in our room today potentially a victim of domestic violence. 1 in 5 men have been victims of domestic violence. And I know often I'll probably refer to the domestic violence victim as she or wife or whatever. That's because typically 85% of men are the domestic violence aggressors, but that's not always the situation, especially in our modern families now where we have same-sex couples. The roles can be reversed. So I don't mean to pigeonhole individuals into these specific categories, but typically what I see as a judge presiding over domestic violence cases, mainly it's husband versus wife or boyfriend versus girlfriend. That's typically what we see. The pandemic really increased the numbers of domestic violence. And why? Does anyone know why that may be or have an idea? Yes.
It's probably because, the more time you spend with somebody, it's like, if y'all don't really cook through and all that time together, it's not good for you to be together.
Well, somebody's getting an Easter egg. Yes, that's exactly right. So when I have domestic violence cases and I go to the jail into initial appearances, meaning if somebody's arrested, they have to be seen by a judge within 24 hours to determine bond, whether they can bond out of jail. It's always an increase of cases, domestic violence cases, after the weekend, after the holiday, like Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas, because everyone's home, everyone's together, there are more points of contact, more points of friction. If somebody's aggressive and volatile, that doesn't just melt away because of a holiday. It actually probably increases the stress and anxiety on that household. The same thing happens with the pandemic. Individuals aren't going to work, they're staying at home, finances may be impacted, there's a whole host of reasons. But I think the pandemic really caused a surge in domestic violence cases that we see across the nation. The National DV hotline, and we can share that information, that received 74,000 calls, chats, and texts in 1 month alone, and that was a surge, the highest that they had ever seen, and that was around the time of the pandemic and a little bit after. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate. The effects on children are tremendous. So if children are around domestic violence, there's a 3 times their higher rate that they will either become a victim of domestic violence or become an aggressor.
Does anybody know why that is, or have an idea as to why that is? So some studies have shown that if children, especially in a small developmental age, are exposed to that kind of trauma, they begin to learn that as normalizing behavior. They see that, mom and dad getting into an argument, that's how grown-ups treat each other. Or that's what a man is supposed to do, or what a woman is supposed to do. And like my wife said, the aggressor can be either husband, wife, spouse, whichever one it is, but that kind of trauma at an early age almost ingrains something in their brain chemistry that, I don't want to say force them, but it definitely creates a higher risk of those children either being aggressors or seeing that it's okay to let someone do that to you and accepting it because they believe that it's normal or that they don't have the power to do anything about it. And that can have, generational detrimental effects, throughout time. And that's one of we talk about, breaking that cycle on a generational basis.
And I see it in the courtroom. Sometimes, most often actually, the abuser will talk about or disclose that they were maybe the victim of child abuse, or their mother and father had a domestic violence type relationship. So this is what they think a healthy, normal relationship looks like, and so that's how they think that they should treat their partner. And it is a generational thing, but there are tools in place to help break that cycle. But I think there's a common myth that domestic violence only affects poor households, maybe minority households or uneducated individuals, but that's really not the case. The studies show that it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. Also, I think, and the experts agree, that these numbers are underreported, meaning it's worse than this. And that's because domestic violence is a terrible, toxic secret. It's a terrible secret, and a lot of people hold that in. However, one of the best ways for an individual to fight against domestic violence is to shine a spotlight on it. My dad used to always say, secrets just fester. If you want to make it better, you shine a spotlight on it, and you say what you need to say, and you stick up for yourself. And he made me a very independent woman. And sometimes,
Absolutely,
yeah. But domestic violence victims generally agree that speaking about it and talking about it really is empowering, and so that's just one part of it. I think a common question that gets asked in these domestic violence cases, and even attorneys that appear before me will ask the domestic violence victim. So if there's a hearing and the domestic violence abuser has a lawyer and that lawyer is questioning the victim, there's a question that they ask that personally drives me nuts. And I don't judge them for it, but I understand why they ask that, but it's an interesting question. And does anyone have any questions? What do you think that question is? What did you do? Yeah, that's. Why did you allow it? Yes. Yeah. So there's often, why did you let this continue? Because guess what? These domestic violence victims, it's not overnight. The abuser doesn't say, hey, I want to dominate and control you, right? It's very subtle over time. But a lot of attorneys and normal people, and I frankly asked myself the same question when I first started in domestic violence. Why did they stay for so long? Why didn't they leave? Why didn't they get out? And it wasn't until I really started to learn about this cycle of violence that I really understand the psyche of what happens. And the experts commonly talk about this cycle of violence. There's a tension building phase, some abusive incident, and then there's a honeymoon phase, right? So what that means is there's this tension building phase where somebody, the victim, is on eggshells. They don't know what is going to set off the other person. What if they say something? What if they do something? What if they don't wear the right clothes? What if they don't cook the right dinner? What if they don't say and do all the right things? What if they didn't take care of their children in the right way? They're walking on eggshells because they don't know what's going to happen. Then the domestic violence abuser explodes. Either physical abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, something big happens. But because this is a relationship and it's a family, I believe domestic violence abusers believe they love the other individual. Their definition of love is probably skewed, but they apologize. I'm so sorry, I can't believe this happened. And now we go into this honeymoon phase. I'll never do it again, I'll change, I swear, I promise I'll change. Then they treat the other victim like they were treated when this relationship first started, when it was all gifts and all the niceties and all the wonderful aspects of a relationship. We go into the honeymoon phase, and then the tension just starts again. And it's this constant cycle, this cycle of violence, what they call, that can happen in the mind of a victim. And that's why I think some of these victims stay, and some of the victims don't go. Now, yeah.
And I think studies have shown that there is a correlation with domestic violence and substance abuse and substance use. For instance, when I was talking about children that experience domestic violence matters, they're actually at a higher risk to abuse drugs, alcohol, or other illicit substances, or even prescription medication when they don't have a prescription or to excess. And then when they become adults, they fall back on that same pattern to deal with the issues that they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with, and they never learned as a child. So they turn to that same self-medicating, and you'll see in a lot of cases there's allegations of drug abuse and alcohol abuse, and that sometimes, usually, it's after the tension building phase, right before the abusive incident. There's something, somebody has too much to drink, or somebody gets stoned, and then it sets it off, and then that's when you never know what's going to happen. It could be just a mild moment where you start out into an argument, that then turns physical, then turns violent.
When is the most dangerous part of this cycle or this part of the relationship? Yes, sir. Yes, I'm sorry. The honeymoon phase, that's a good one. That can be, because there's a little bit of denial that's in there. Yes. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. When a victim tries to leave, that is the most dangerous part of the whole relationship, because the abuser, their main focus is power and control. That's what they want. That's what they're seeking. Everything they do is so that they can have this power and control. And when the victim says, I'm leaving, I'm done with this relationship, they are now starting to lose this power and control. That is the most dangerous time. I think I read a statistic that said 1 in 5 homicides it's because the domestic violence victim tried to leave the situation and the abuser tried to exercise the dominance and control, and it resulted in some kind of violent activity. A red flag is the presence of a firearm. You know, you mix firearms into this volatile situation. There's a statistic that says there's a 500% chance increase of some kind of homicide or serious bodily injury. So there are all these red flags. Choking is another red flag. Choking is a red flag of domestic violence abusers. It's a way to show that the rate of serious bodily harm or injury or death resulting from incidents of choking are going to now be increased and higher. We talked about power and control. There's also a power and control wheel. This is what they believe domestic violence abusers, what they do. So if you look at the center, it's power and control. That's what the abuser is ultimately trying to get. And there are spokes. And this is the way they do it. One can be using intimidation, right? Using emotional abuse, isolating. Isolation of a partner is a red flag that this may not be a healthy relationship, right? You don't need your friends. You don't need your family members. You should just hang out with my family and friends and family members. That is a red flag of maybe this might not be a healthy relationship. Not always. Minimizing, denying, and blaming, and gaslighting. No, domestic violence victim. I didn't say that. I didn't do that.
You're imagining things.
You're imagining things. You're wrong. You're the reason I hit you. You're the reason that I caused
Why did you make me do that? You know what it does to me when you do X, Y, or Z. You know that it sets me up. Why would you do that if you know that's going to happen?
Using economic abuse. Power and control comes with controlling the purse strings, controlling the bank account. Think about a situation where a husband works all the time, the wife is a stay-at-home and has no money, no resources. If they try to leave, where are they going to go? How are they going to pay for a hotel room? Now add children into that mix. Now add pets and a dog. Where are these domestic violence shelters? Where can I go with family and children? How am I going to get there? I don't even have the keys to the car. I don't have credit cards. I don't have debit cards. I mean, these all contribute to why I think it's so challenging for victims to leave as well. Another part is using coercion and threats, and using children, unfortunately, in the mix. I think the hardest part about domestic violence is the children. They're completely innocent in all of this. They're seeing the worst, and sometimes they're put in between a spouse or parents or loved ones or caretakers. And I think it's obvious how traumatizing that is, but that is one way that domestic violence abusers use power and control in these types of relationships.
Now, to juxtapose what I consider to be a very dark kind of topic, I want to talk to you about a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is where you have equality at the center, where each partner is treated with the same value as the other. You lean on each other in hard times. You enjoy things with each other in the good times. You bring each other together. You lift each other up. On the outer ring, instead of having that violence that you see there, it's non-violence. It's because those two people are in tune. They're treating each other equally. They have mutual respect for one another, mutual respect for each other's opinions. There's trust and support between the two of them. They're honest, and they hold each other accountable. Sometimes that's not easy to do. Is to be held accountable or to allow someone to hold you accountable. But in those healthy relationships, right, we allow people to hold us accountable for things. There's also sexual safety. You're never in fear of anything being done to you in a sexual manner that's going to harm you, or it's something that you don't want to do. And you also have the ability to step out away from each other and to connect with your friends and groups and outside of this relationship and have those healthy other relationships together and allowing each other that freedom to do that without worry that something's going to happen, that somebody's going to cheat on you or anything like that. That's what, like I said, a healthy relationship looks like that.
So we wanted to now shift gears and talk about domestic violence and in the two ways that it really comes to the courthouse. We have the criminal side of it and the civil side of it.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the criminal side, and when we talk about the civil side, civil is an injunction. That means you want the courts to step in and stop someone from doing something. No contact. I don't want that person around me. In the criminal aspect of it, it usually occurs when there is that explosive, abusive moment. Somebody hits someone else and the police are called. When the police are called, they have to make a determination once they get on the scene as to who is the most credible witness, who is the initial aggressor, and 99% of the time, one of those parties is going to go to jail. What happens when you go to jail? Usually these things happen at night. Nobody does all this in the broad daylight in the presence of everyone else is usually at home. Somebody's going to go to the jail, they're going to get arrested. They're going to spend that night in jail. The next morning or the next day, they're going to have an initial appearance. Florida law requires that someone who's arrested for a crime be presented in front of a judge at least within 24 hours of their arrest. So even on the weekends, all of us judges rotate. We have weekend duty here at the Orange County Jail. We see individuals who were arrested the night before, and some of those have been going to be accused of committing domestic violence. They'll go through that initial appearance, then they'll be set for an arraignment. Usually they're given the opportunity to decide if they're going to hire a private attorney to represent them, or to, if they qualify, to use the services of our public defender's office. Or sometimes people will choose to represent themselves. It's a constitutional right, they're able to do that. Then they're going to be set for an arraignment. At initial appearances, they're also usually going to be given a bond, unless there's a certain circumstance where they're not going to be given a bond until they see another judge. A bond or bail is the money that they pay in order to get out of jail. And usually when that happens at the initial appearances, the judge is going to do one thing, especially in a domestic violence case. I don't know any of my colleagues that wouldn't do this. They're going to order non-monetary conditions, and one of those is going to be no contact with the victim. Now that, in those criminal instances, is a quick way to get what you are seeking or what ultimately somebody wants in the civil context, and that's that no contact. The civil context is a different burden, it's a different standard of proof, and it's a different length of time. But so in that initial criminal context, within 24 hours of being arrested, more than likely there's going to be a contact or a no contact order. Now sometimes the victims will come into court and say, well, it's not that big of a deal. I want no hostile contact. It was just one time, it's never happened in the past. That can be dicey and dangerous. But sometimes victims will come in there and ask for that. But then they'll eventually see a judge for an arraignment. It's usually after the actual formal criminal charges are made. And at that point in time, they'll be told, this individual will be told what the actual criminal charges brought against them are. At the arraignment, they'll be given a trial date and a pretrial date. In felony court, where I sit, if you're accused of a felony domestic battery, you have to be brought to trial within 175 days of your arrest. That's your speedy trial period. Now, sometimes those can be waived, and it goes on and on. But the ultimate end of that is if you go to a trial in front of a jury, the state has to prove that person's guilt beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. And if they do that, then that person can be incarcerated, can be put on probation, can have to pay fines. But those are the criminal penalties that can be associated with this that are separate and completely apart from what we do in the civil context of injunctions.
All right, so I sit in the injunction court. It's where people come and get what's known as a restraining order. So if someone believes that they're a victim of domestic violence, they can come to the courthouse and and file a petition for an injunction. Does anyone know how much it costs for that person to come and file a petition? Anybody? How much do you think it is? It's free. Who said that? Who said it's free? Yes, that's right. It's free. It's absolutely free. That makes sense, right? It's free. Oh gosh, that's fun dip. I'm sorry about that.
I have to get rid of it because my kids stick their fingers in it and they dye their fingers different colors.
And their fingers turn green and all sorts. So yes, it's free. And is that a good thing? Is it not a good thing? Why do you think that's a positive, beneficial thing? Anybody? Right. It's just like we had talked about. When do you think it's not a beneficial thing? Maybe. Right? And so she was saying maybe someone is trying to keep the other person from the kids. I'm sorry? It's a bogus claim? No, that never happens at the courthouse. People don't come to the courthouse and file bogus free petitions for injunctions. And I say that lightly. Obviously, it's a mix. And, it's my job to sort through what people are saying, look at the evidence that they have and they give me, and I have to sort of figure it out and try and determine whether or not there was domestic violence. But yes, it's free. That obviously is beneficial. It helps an individual who can't afford it, but at the same time, we have to be careful with the petitions that get filed. So ultimately, if someone files a petition for injunction, they're asking for a restraining order. They're saying no contact. I don't want that other person to have contact. I don't want face-to-face contact or indirect contact, no text message, social media, or have a mother reach out to the other person. You can't have a third person do your work or do your bidding. That's essentially what they're asking for. Also, if an injunction gets entered, that person on the other side, that's the respondent. So the petitioner is the one that wants the injunction. The respondent is the one that is on the other side of that. Okay, so petitioner, respondent. The respondent can't go within 500 feet of the petitioner's home, other places that they go to frequently. There are different types of petitions for injunctions. We have obviously domestic violence, but there's stalking, there's repeat violence, sexual violence, and dating violence. I mean, we could spend another hour on all those things. They have different legal requirements. But when that petition gets filed, we get it as the judges. I look over it. I assume everything is true in there. And if true, does it meet the legal definition? If it does, I grant a temporary injunction. All right? So the petitioner comes in, they file their petition, a judge looks at it, they can either grant it. If they do, that's a temporary injunction. The other person on the other side has to get served with it. All right? If they're served with it, that temporary injunction is in effect for 15 days. So let's think about it practically. Wife comes in, files for a petition for an injunction, they live together, they have children together. Sometimes the other side, the respondent, doesn't even know the petitioner is even coming and getting an injunction. They get the injunction, let's say husband gets served, he cannot go within 500 feet of his home. He cannot go within 500 feet of maybe the kid's school. The husband, if they're served with it, can't have any contact with the wife. No text messages, no social media, no emails, no face-to-face contact, no telephone calls. It's a complete blackout for 15 days. That's a temporary injunction. At the 15 days, then everyone comes before me and we have a final hearing. At that final hearing, I hear from everyone. Because remember, when I grant the injunction in my office, I don't hear from the other side. I just hear from one side only, right? That's just to get a temporary, to cool the waters. And then we have a final hearing within 15 days, and at that time, everyone comes. Typically, they're pro se. They're representing themselves. It's very expensive to hire an attorney, especially in these types of cases. There are all kinds of attorneys, but it's challenging for some of the parties to hire attorneys. So usually, I would say about 60% are pro se. They don't have lawyers. They don't know the law. They don't know the rules. Sometimes one person has a lawyer, the other doesn't. But ultimately, everyone comes and I hear them out. And then I have to make a decision at the end of it. A, do I grant a final injunction? If so, how long? Now, the final injunction would keep someone from their home, whether they own it or not, and there are consequences. If an injunction gets entered against the respondent, and in my scenario it was husband versus wife, let's say a final injunction is entered, there are consequences to that. So the husband in that scenario their time sharing with the children can be limited. Time sharing is the time you spend with your kids. It's the overnight visits, taking them to places, whatever, having dinner with them, time sharing, any time you have with your kids. The injunction can limit that. It can require supervised visitation. It can require that you all go to a school for 2 hours on a Saturday where other people are looking. Okay? These are the things we decide. That person cannot possess weapons or firearms. If they have a job where they have to carry a firearm, like a security guard, they can't have that job anymore. If they're a teacher, they're probably going to affect their licensing. If they want to enter into the military or go to college, it could impact that on a negative basis. It's enforceable all across the United States. And if that person violates the injunction, meaning the injunction says no contact and that person makes a phone call and reaches out to the petitioner, that act alone could subject them to a criminal case. So there are a lot of potential consequences.
And so, like when I talked about the criminal matters before, it's not just that initial domestic violence incident that can subject someone to criminal penalties. If there's no contact order from a criminal court or an injunction that's in place, and let's say you're just strolling down Baldwin Park, you're not supposed to be within 500 feet of Baldwin Park Elementary. School doesn't even need to be in session at that time, and someone's within 500 feet of that school, they've now violated that injunction, and it doesn't subject them to any civil penalties. That's now a criminal matter where there can be a felony charge filed against them again for the same kind of issue, same parties, but it's now another criminal matter that they have to deal with.
So we've done a lot of talking. So we want you to sit in our seats. We want you to feel what we feel. Okay, so we have come up with scenarios. We will be the parties. These are not actual events. They're just dramatizations, the whole Law and Order disclaimer. They're just dramatizations. They're not from real cases. It's just for educational and informational purposes only. Okay,
So as you hear from us, we're gonna take some breaks through there, ask you all some questions. You're gonna get the chance to be judge for 5 minutes. And this is really to kind of and we're not expecting you all to know any of the legal definitions or anything like that, but we want to give you an idea of just what we see, and even just from a human perspective, how it feels, or how it looks from our perspective when we do have these very significant, very heavy matters we have to deal with.
Okay.
So I'm going to read you guys scenario number 1. Boyfriend and girlfriend live together with girlfriend's 2 kids, 17-year-old and a 9-year-old. They have been together for over 10 years and have lived together for about the same time. They both own the home. The boyfriend is the father of the youngest son, who is 8 years old. Both are in their 40s. Girlfriend is a teacher at a local elementary school. Boyfriend has a business where he cleans pools. His income isn't consistent, but he gets jobs here and there. When the kids get home, he usually takes care of the kids. Boyfriend and girlfriend get into an argument. Girlfriend files for a petition for domestic violence injunction, and the court grants the temporary injunction. Boyfriend is served with the injunction. Boyfriend cannot have any contact with the girlfriend. Girlfriend gets exclusive control and possession of the home. It's the day of the final return hearing. No one has any attorneys, and both girlfriend and boyfriend represent themselves.
Good evening. We are here today for the final return hearing. This is where the court will determine whether a final injunction or restraining order will be entered here today. This is the opportunity for both of you, both sides, the petitioner and the respondent, to present evidence and testify today. Petitioner, over here. A temporary injunction was entered 15 days ago. First, let me place you both under oath. Do you both solemnly swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Madam Petitioner, why don't you tell me what happened on March the 12th, 2024?
I've had enough. I cannot tell you how many times he has just called me all kinds of names. We've been together for 10 years, and I've had it. He doesn't give me any money for the kids. He doesn't help out around the house, and we had an agreement. He owes me all kinds of money, and I have for everything that's happened. I have recorded video calls, I have photos, I have everything.
Okay. Why don't you tell me what happened on March the 12th?
Well, he picked up food from McDonald's, and he took a cheeseburger and smushed it in my face. I don't have pictures or anything like that, but he was sitting right next to me, eating, and he just got mad, and he lost it. And he took the cheeseburger and rubbed it on my face, and he hit me with it. That was it. And I came down to the courthouse and got an injunction.
Can I say something, please?
No, sir. Is there anything else, ma'am?
No.
Okay. All right. Now, Mr. Respondent,
Finally,
please give me your response.
I have been living out of my car for the last 2 weeks, and it has been an absolute hell. I got kicked out of my house, the one that we own together, and the couch surfing is the best I can do. I can't believe this happened to me. She's the one that's been harassing me, Judge. She constantly calls me names. For years, she's been yelling at me, telling me how much of a loser I am, calling me horrible names, saying these things in front of the kids just because I don't have some fancy job. I haven't even seen my son in 2 weeks. Not even one word for them. I never did any of the things that she's saying. It's all lies. That is not what happened. What really happened was I was doing a job working on a pool. It was hot. It was a hard day at work, and I had been through the ringer. I was starving and stopped at McDonald's on my way home, and it was the first time I'd had a chance to sit down on the couch and eat or do anything all day. We're sitting on the couch, TV's on, I was finally eating. I'd been out there all day. I'd barely sat down, and she just starts in on me. You loser, you can't do anything. We got. When are you going to get some work? What are you going to do to pay me back for all those bills I've paid? You're a terrible crap father. You didn't take his notebook to school with him like you promised you would this morning. The house is a mess, and you forgot to clean up all the dog crap that was all over the floor yesterday. It didn't stop. It just on and on, needling me. I was eating, and I lost it. I admit it. I started yelling back at her. I may have said some things that I didn't mean, but I did not put my hands on her. I did not get close to her, but she was already close to my face. I think I may have pulled my hand back, but I don't know what she is talking about the stupid cheeseburger, Judge. It never happened.
Couple questions. I'm going to ask these two to step out of their roles as petitioner and respondent and help with this discussion, but this is where you are the judge. And Julio has a microphone there, and it's important, I think, that you let him get to you when we call on you, okay? All right, you've heard the petitioner, you've heard the response from the despondent. Do you grant the injunction for protection against domestic violence? Who wants to give that a shot? Based on what you heard. Don't make me pick on Charmaine. Okay, well, thank you.
I will say grant the injunction just because they both acknowledged that the McDonald's situation happened. They both seem very frustrated, but nobody never really admits to doing wrong. So for me, I would grant it because I definitely believe even if he put the cheeseburger in her face, that's basically battery. He didn't physically use force, but still. So if he's able to do that, even though he's saying he didn't, he'll probably do worse later.
Before we get hold on, Julio, an opposing viewpoint, if we do grant it, as Judge Denise Beamer told you, we have to determine the length. So based on what you've heard, how long would you impose the final injunction?
Not so easy, huh? Yeah.
No, it's not. I will say 6 months.
Okay. Now, let
And-
me ask you, if anybody has a
6 months? I didn't
That
do anything.
cheeseburger could have hurt her.
anybody have a differing viewpoint or might need more information, whether to grant this injunction or not? And please, if there's something else we need to add. Oh, how about over here, Julio? Thank you.
I don't think there's enough evidence, so I would say no. I mean, it sounds like they definitely have domestic problems. They have marital, well, they're not married, the equivalent of marital issues, but I don't see the violence now that would justify it. Although I'd feel really terrible if something bad happened later.
Let's do this. Julio, let's get one more, and then maybe we'll just get a vote before we maybe provide some additional information. Right over here, Julio, in the fourth row back. You don't need to, ma'am.
Well, I feel that this is a situation where it's she said, he said. And do they have any witnesses? And anybody can come and say, yes, I saw him do that, or I didn't see him. The injunction might be a little shorter, just to keep them cool and away from each other. But you can't really tell who did what or didn't do
If
what.
you were going to grant it, it may not be for 6 months, maybe a little shorter. We
Right.
have some additional information, sir, so hold on. But based on what you know now, by show of hands, who would grant the final injunction? Okay. 5 or 6, okay? Sir, hold your thought. Well, go ahead right now, Julio. If you could go ahead and get this gentleman, we'll get his thoughts, and I sort of tipped it off because we do have some more information for you. But yes, sir.
Is there another option with the mandatory counseling?
Is there another option, Judges Beamer?
No, because there's nothing over the person, let's say he's the respondent, there's nothing over him to hook the counseling, meaning you have to have the injunction that's in place, and then you can do mental health counseling, drug abuse, treatment, battery intervention program, which is a program to talk about issues. But you have to have the injunction for jurisdiction of the court, and then you tag on the other things. So these are some of the, that's a great question. I would love to do some extra things, not the injunction, but that's a great point.
John.
And a lot of times, I mean, we do have to make those decisions. And, we want to be Solomon. You know, we want to make everything fair for everyone and not the most, drastic measure. But as my wife said, without that injunction in place, the court doesn't have the ability to just order someone to go to any kind of counseling or to protect them. And another thing, I don't know if I played, but we have to determine credibility sometimes based on how the people present. I mean, I don't know if you heard my lovely wife. She's very calm, very collected. I, on the other hand, slightly unhinged. Some of those things, those are credibility markers and determinations that we have to look at as judges when we make those decisions, just the same way you all do in your regular lives when you're deciding whether to believe someone or not. I mean, if anybody's got kids, you know what that's like. They get into a fight. Who hit your brother? You know, we have to make those judgment calls and those credibility determinations on a daily basis.
So let's go back to our hearing and see if there's any other information, okay? Madam Petitioner, is there anything, do you have a response to what the respondent said?
Well, of course I do. He hit me with the cheeseburger. I mean, I didn't have the photographs. I don't have the videos. He cocked his hand back and he got it right up to my face and hit me with it. It didn't leave a bruise or a mark or anything. You don't understand. We made an agreement. We weren't getting along last year. We kept arguing even more. He was going to move out. That was the deal. We agreed he would move out last year and we would go our own ways, but he wouldn't leave, and he's just making excuses. I just don't feel safe around him. I don't know what he's capable of next.
Judge, it's just not true. Now, we did make an agreement that I would be getting out of the house. We've been having some trouble, and we made that agreement. But I know it's Florida. There are a whole bunch of different pool cleaning businesses, and mine is small. Business has been bad lately. One of my pumps broke. I actually lost the business. I didn't even have the money to move out of the house. I mean, what was I supposed to do, Judge? Live out on the streets like I have been? She's doing all of this just because she wants me out of the house, and I'm not doing it fast enough. I told you I had no money where to go, and she's just doing this just to get me out of the house faster.
All right, back to you, judges. You have some new information. Does this change any of your opinions about what we should do? Grant this injunction? Any thoughts at all? Right over here, thank you.
I was just wondering, was there a time when they had the same problem, like a number of years ago before this started? Would there be a correlation between that time and this time?
One of the things we're going to talk about is if you were the judge, what other questions would you ask? And this attendee wants to know if something like this has ever happened again. Do you ever see that, Judge Beamer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Some cases, they're brand new to the court system. Some cases, there are 10, 15 cases of injunctions back and forth for 10, 20 years. So each case is different, and it really just varies. But in this hypothetical, we can assume, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And I want to take it, because this is another one of those nuances where put on our legal hat. Some of those things might not be relevant or even admissible at a hearing under our rules of evidence. Those could be considered something we call prior bad acts. And the idea is that information doesn't necessarily always get to come in if it's being used for what we call propensity, meaning somebody did this before, it makes it more likely that they did it now. That is not a purpose for the evidence. Now, there are exceptions to that, but I think that's a perfectly natural question to ask about these kind of situations.
Is that a question that you ask, and is that sort of a question admissible in your world, where it almost is not in our world, where Judge Beamer and I handle criminal cases? But in your world, has he or she ever done this before? Is that valid?
Yeah. The family rules allow us to look at all the other cases, but each case is so fact-specific. Each case has its own context of what was happening, and so I just kind of have to balance everything and ask maybe some more questions of the parties, but it's really hard to say. It's just on a case-by-case, and what my intuition is telling me about the way they're sounding, what they're saying, and all the nonverbal communication.
Okay, so a few more facts we'll give you before we move on to, yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir, I'm sorry.
I just have to say, him saying that y'all had this agreement, was this agreement on paper? Did y'all go ahead and talk about this? Was it a verbal agreement? Because I just feel coming into it with getting smashed with a cheeseburger is crazy, because it's like me personally, if someone hit me with a cheeseburger, it's the video was gonna be evident, the picture was gonna be took. I just need more evidence, because it's baby, you saying you got hit with a cheeseburger and you ain't taking no picture, it's crazy.
I mean, it's like you're in my head, right? I mean, these are some of the thoughts that I'm thinking when I hear this. But at the same time, when a petitioner is crying, it's not really about the cheeseburger, you know? It's about the humiliation. Maybe, right? That can be an argument. It's about the humiliation and the fact that she has to now come before a stranger, the judge, and deputies are there, clerks are there, and come here and now face this person that did that to her. And there's probably other things that they haven't said. I mean, so that's why it's so, yes, you're like reading the thoughts out of my brain, but there's also that other side to it too, and that's what makes these DV cases, I think, extra tricky. Yeah. Are you his lawyer or something? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, sometimes, as Judge Denise Beamer said, one party might be represented and the other might not. And that can create a disparity here, right? The respondent admitted, I agreed to get out. He didn't. Does that make him more credible, or does it make her story more believable? And if there's a lawyer on one side, lawyers are real good about spinning stuff. Depending on what side I was on, I could either use that statement against him or for him. Right, but this Judge Beamer, who handles these cases daily, she's got to figure out whether his admission, I agreed to get out, but I didn't. Does that hurt him or help him? Sort of depends on your perspective, right? It's a tough job. Yes, ma'am, right here, Talia.
I was wondering, as a judge, I would be asking, what about the child care he did do? Wasn't that type of a monetary contribution to the relationship and the family dynamics? And also I'm wondering about the effects on the kids, you know, once he's out and then he's even have less money or less chance to contribute. Anyway, yes, I would like to see them resolve things, but anyway.
Yeah, those are good points. We'll keep going. Maybe there'll be more facts about that. I don't know.
Okay. Sir, anything else?
Judge, I have to tell you, this ain't the first time she's done this. She's done it before. A long time ago, she filed an injunction against her baby daddy to get him out of the house right before we got together. She knows exactly how to use this system. She's been doing this to fast track it and get me out of the house because I wasn't doing it on her timeline. How am I supposed to see my sons?
He's not the father of my first son, who is 17 years old, okay?
I raised him since he was a baby, Judge. We got together when he was only 4 years old, and I'm the only father figure that boy's ever known. Now, the other one, my youngest son, that's my flesh and blood. That is my son.
I just want to keep him away from my sons. I don't know what he's going to do.
But what about my stuff? Everything I own is at the house. I haven't been able to get any clothes. I've been wearing this same suit for the last 2 weeks. It's getting a little right, Judge. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. All my pool equipment, do you have any idea how hard it is to wash a pool in a suit? It's ridiculous. I can't make money if I don't have my pool equipment, and I can't get my pool equipment if I can't go to the house. I can't pay for anything now. Where am I going to live? How am I going to get food? What am I supposed to do?
Okay. Judges, this is all of the information you have about this case, and you need to make a decision. Okay? Do you want to do a show of hands? Sure. By show of hands, now that you've got the full story, now we know about kids and stuff, who would grant this final injunction, just by show of hands?
A few more people.
A handful more, okay. And ma'am up front, hold it, what you got? I got it. For how long?
Probably for about 6 months, so he can get out. And I would let, I guess you could have the police go with him to get his stuff out of the house.
Yeah.
Is that common?
Yes, very much.
Very common.
I think also, is there a way to, the injunction is for her, the two of them, right? Can he still see the kids if they get a third party to transfer?
Okay, so is this supervised visitation where dad can only see his son, the biological son, because technically he has no rights to the older son, right? And that's a whole other hour. But do you do supervised time sharing? Do you do unsupervised? Do you do weekends? Do you do 3 days on, 3 days off? Do you do a week on, week off? Where is pickup and drop off? They can't have any contact. Where does the you know, what about alimony? What about child support? How much do they make? I mean, these are all things that we have to decide. I mean, it's wild.
And we're just talking about really the domestic violence aspect and component of it right now, but there are all other statutes that deal with what we call time sharing, or what was traditionally known as child custody. You know, who got to see the kids every other weekend with dad? You see Mrs. Doubtfire, right? Okay. You know, Robin Williams had those kids every other weekend, and he tried to figure out a way so he could see them more often. But those are the things we have to deal with. And you also have to make a decision when we're talking about supervised or unsupervised visitation. You know, does that parent represent a present danger to the children such that the children need to have someone watching over them when they interact with them? If there's not evidence of the actual facts and testimony that are brought out, we have a lot of discretion in this, but it would be an abuse of our discretion if there's no evidence to suggest that, and more importantly, if nobody asks for it. As judges, we have to be able to stay in our lane. It's not our job to make arguments for people or to take sides. That's the reason why we wear a black robe. It's to show our impartiality. It doesn't reflect light or doesn't reflect any kind of bias when we're on the bench. So we can't make those arguments for people unless they're asking us to do things.
And let's say, oh yeah, go ahead.
A quick question. Can it be extended to get more information?
Can it be extended to get more information?
What if no one's asking for that? There are so many times I want more information. I mean, of course I would love a witness. I would love a video. I would love photographs. But sometimes what people bring and their word is all they have. But you bring up a good point. What if the 17-year-old was there and saw this incident happen? If you were a judge, would you want the 17-year-old to come into court and testify? Who says yes? Raise your hand. Who says no? I mean,
What about the other son? What if the other younger son saw it? No? So generally speaking, children under the age of 18 are not allowed to testify in any domestic relations cases unless somebody makes a specific motion to have that person come in and the court makes a determination that it is not detrimental to the child and it's in the child's best interest to be able to do that. Otherwise, in domestic cases, children are not even allowed in the courtroom. So, I mean, I've had cases where, you know, they've got a 3-month-old. I'm sorry, you can't bring the child in the courtroom. You can't have the child come in and testify. And sometimes that's hard. I can understand that's hard for people to understand and grasp. They have somebody who saw it, you know, an eyewitness to something. But if they don't take those proper steps under the rules, because we have to treat those self-represented parties the same way that we would anyone that has a lawyer. It's, you know, equal justice under the law. That means everyone is held to the same standard, whether you have a lawyer or not.
Okay, there's another hypo, but in the interest of time, we're going to go to a question and answer session now. There should be some questions. I'm going to step back and let the experts in this field.
thank you for your help. We had more hypotheticals, but they're pretty long. But I think you get I love Judge Judy. I love her so much. And then I just wanted to end with this before we turn it over to question and answer. This came out last week or something. It was in People magazine. Does anyone recognize the folks that are in that picture? That's right, Tiger Woods and his wife. And the headline says, Tiger Woods and ex-wife Ellen Nordgren celebrate as 15-year-old son Charlie receives golf championship ring. So look, I mean, domestic violence is a very heavy topic, but I have seen, quote, success stories where potentially an abuser or a victim gets out of it, they learn from it, they grow from it, they change their behavior. So it's not always a failure. There can be bright lights or silver lining to these terrible situations.
And a lot of times sometimes they do it organically on their own. They're able to cope with that and mend those old wounds. But a lot of times it takes the court intervention, you know, through certain programs, like the Batterers Intervention Program, through different nonprofit organizations like Harbor House has programs. Some of them are strictly for women, some of them are strictly for men. But they help people in situations learn more or less how to reprogram the way that they think and how to reorient the way that they respond to stressors and how they cope and deal with things that seem to be out of their control.
So with the 10 minutes we have left, we'll open it up to if you all have any questions, not just on domestic violence, but I'm happy to answer questions about our job, any common questions that you have. Obviously, certain canons and rules don't allow us to answer all questions, but if we
No
can't-
politics.
Yeah. But if we can't answer them, we'll let you know. Yes. Oh, sorry, sir.
So a minor under 18 cannot testify, but if a 15-year-old commits a capital crime, they can be charged as an adult?
So, yes, and so with different areas of the law, there are different statutes that control that particular type of case. So in criminal cases, they don't have that same restriction on children testifying because they can be charged as adult, the way that the legislature has crafted the statutes. But when it comes to the domestic relations or domestic violence division, they also have specific rules. Because here's one of the things, if you have a child that's impressionable, and do you really want them hearing and seeing the worst parts of the people who they think are their heroes? That's the way I look at it, as a rationale, kind of common sense perspective to the law, if you can call it that.
Yeah, but there are rare exceptions, but it's honestly, as a judge, it's the last thing I want to do is talk to any kids and bring them here and now associate the courthouse with that incident.
But
Great question.
and one of the things that can be done is called an in-camera interview, where you don't have either of the parties there. It's just the judge and the child and a court reporter. And what I've done in those situations, I've asked the parties to submit written questions. If they have any objections, then I'll read those questions with the court reporter. It protects their due process rights. And then they can get a transcript of that. So if they need to put it into evidence, there are exceptions to that kind of testimony. So that child doesn't have to be in court having to now, in front of strangers, pick mom or dad.
Yeah, and,
Yep, we've got a question.
yes.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just wondering with the younger kids, if they have like evidence, like, you know, if they've drawn a picture or something, can that be used in court in order to, you know, kind of connect with what the problem has been?
So evidence can be used for different things to show different things, different ways to show different things. It would just have to be relevant, meaning does the photograph or drawing matter in the trial? So I think it all depends. I've never actually had somebody ask. Actually, in criminal and sexual abuse cases, they'll draw on a body part where the alleged sexual battery happens. So sometimes those come into evidence and the jury sees those, but it really is case specific. That's a great question. Yes.
I have two questions. The first one is about what you would like to see or what would be changed in the statutes or the rules to help address some of these cases. And the second one is based on a quick hypothetical. Let's say the guy was a pirate, was a pirate as a job, and the lady was in love with Aquaman. And came to court, and I'm just curious, is there such a thing as a mutual domestic violence? And if that's the case, do you then apply an injunction to the other person, or they would have had to have filed that as well?
Those are great questions. So mutual injunctions, meaning, okay, fine, you get an injunction, let's keep the peace and call it a day. Those are prohibited by law. So the statute actually says, no, you can't do that. You have to go on a case-by-case basis. You listen to the petitioner. Do they meet the definition of domestic violence? If so, grant and determine all the other stuff. And, and then you listen to the other side, because sometimes there's cross petitions, meaning both sides file petitions. And I've had hearings with those. And then the other part is, what do we want to see change in the law?
I think that's one of the hard.
How much time do you?
That's one of the questions that I think when I talk about kind of judges staying in their lanes, we have the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. We leave those questions up to the individuals that are passing the laws because, those are your elected officials. They are your voice at the legislature. The power actually belongs to the people and not, all of us. So if, call your senators, call your congressmen if there's something that you all want to see change. Really, our job is not to say what we want the law to be or what we think the law should be, but what the law is and how we apply it. It makes our job sometimes very difficult when we don't have all that information, but that's kind of one of our principles of federalism and our separation of powers in the government.
Question here?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Maria.
She married me. She's got great intuition.
There's a lot of times the law says X, and personally, I don't want to do it. Personally, I think maybe it's unfair, but ultimately, my job is to follow the law. I swore an oath to follow the law. And so I have to put my personal feelings aside and follow what the law says. Because it wouldn't be fair if you came to a judge and I just did whatever I thought was fair. Well, your definition of fair and my definition of fair can be very different. It can be the same, it can be very different. So ultimately, I think my job as a judge is I ultimately have to follow the law no matter what I personally feel. Intuition, though, is, you see it when you know it. Like, you kind of get a feeling and you kind of test those things. It's kind of like if you have kids and someone tells you stories and you listen and you figure out what makes sense or not. And I don't say a lot. I try not to talk a lot in court. Honestly, if you think about it, when I pick my kids up from school, they're just talking so much, and it's hard because all I've done all day is listen. And we don't talk a lot on the bench, because ultimately we make our decision. But I don't want to say too much, right? I just say what I need to say in order to analyze what the law is. So.
At the same time, though, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's got a bill. I mean, it could be a goose, but usually it's a duck.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes.
So just two questions. One is, what would you guys rule on that hypothetical? And then the second one would be, you guys hear some pretty distressing things day in and day out, right? And how do you balance that when you go home? How do you kind of have faith in humanity and also just keep doing what you're doing?
I'll answer that second one first, because when I took the bench, I started out in the domestic relations division, whereas my wife took the bench and started out in criminal. When I took the bench, I love her. My best friend in the entire world. I love our children. But when I came home, those warm moments, when I see my kids and they run and tackle me, all of that I've dealt with throughout the day melts away. And for me, at least, it made me appreciate the fact that I do have, this relationship of equality with my wife and with our children. And I'm thankful every day that we don't have some of these struggles that so many families go through. And really just getting outside, playing with the kids, and not focusing on that until the time comes that you have to. I think it's the only way that you really can do it. You have to be able to compartmentalize some of those things.
Yeah, and we are people of faith, right? So that is a large part of it. I think that is helpful. But I just have to be thankful because there are some days where I have to reorient my brain and not focus on the hard stuff, but it also makes me so thankful for the things that I do have. The honor of this job, I never thought as a kid growing up I would ever have this opportunity to be in this place and situation, and just being thankful, I think really helps. And also having a great partner.
And to answer your first question, how would we rule on that injunction? When it comes to the he said, she said, that's one of the most difficult things. And that's when I talk about you really have to balance the credibility of a witness. I would probably grant the injunction, given the circumstances, the dynamic. Obviously there's a hostile relationship and they don't want to be there. The question is under what parameters and for how long. You can put it in place for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and that gives some cushion and protection, and it gives the power of the law behind it. But the real question is, what are those parameters? Because I don't think they really want to be around each other. But then you have to manage that contact when they have the children to make sure that you're not putting, like when they exchange kids, do pickups and drop-offs. A lot of times I would have it done at school, so that somebody drops a child off at school, the other one picks them up from school. That way there is never an opportunity for those two people to come into conflict with each other in front of their child and to create more problems for that family.
Yes, sir. One more update. Okay. Yeah, I'll get to it. Yes.
I have a question. What if the children contact, I know the man got the injunction, he can't get in touch with the children, but what if the children text him or they call him? Can he take the call? Can he text back to the children if the children started texting him?
Yeah. So the injunction are for the parties, meaning husband and wife or girlfriend and boyfriend. So, I think it's case specific.
But if you have like that supervised time sharing and visitation, if the court order doesn't provide for that kind of contact, then the respondent who the injunction's against, they can face, if they respond back to that, they can face certain legal ramifications if the injunction doesn't allow for it.
Okay, yes, sir, sorry. Yes.
Suppose you're listening to one of these cases and some things that goes through your mind and say, wow, the way to solve this thing is so-and-so. You know, make them sell the house, split the profits, or things like that that may not be in your purview within the law. But you can see a really good happy ending, a reasonably happy ending for the two people involved.
So one of the most, I think, beneficial things that we have is mediation, where you have somebody who is completely impartial. They don't have a dog in the fight. Guess what? They get paid no matter what, by both sides. Or they have our mediation services here in the courthouse. But you have somebody who's able to push and pull and try and get people to come to a place of consensus where they're not so volatile. It's not like nobody's going to get everything they want, and nobody's going to leave losing everything that they had. But when you have those mediation services that are able to kind of push and pull and point out those things, say, you know, why can't you be reasonable? Can you admit that he's at least a good father? Can you admit that, you know, she at least took care of the house while you were there? Weren't there some good times that y'all had? How can we bring this closer together and not have this chasm between the two of them?
Have you ever been threatened, you personally, as judges?
Sure.
By those petitioners?
Oh, those.
Defendants in criminal court, yeah, but
I got sued in federal court twice last week by some of my criminal defendants.
I will say, as a criminal judge, I was never afraid, but in being in this domestic violence family division, I thought I saw people at Publix. Like there is a little bit. I remember I was shot, and I was like, oh my gosh, is that so and so from that case? You know, there was that thought and slight paranoia. And I think it's just because family's so, like, I don't think anyone forgets the judge that did X or Y or didn't do X or Y. So that part makes me a little bit nervous.
So it happened to me. I ran an election campaign, and I was out at an event, and I had tables set up, and people come by, and we meet them, tell them who we are, what we're about. And someone came up, and they started asking me some very specific questions, like too specific. And I knew this is a case that I have in front of me right now. And I politely said to this person, I'm sorry, I understand. I am not allowed to speak with you. That's called ex parte communication. It's strictly prohibited by our codes of conduct, and it could influence me on the case. And luckily I had other people that were there that were able to step in, some lawyers that were there that were able to talk to this person. But I completely removed myself from that situation and went somewhere else. So it does happen that people can confront you.
and I need to, before we thank Judges Beamer, I want to leave you with this before we do that, but I want to address to you, okay, and then one for you. Does it ever enter your mind when you say a questionable petition in front of you, if I deny this, what happens if the potential respondent kills her, hurts her?
I'd be lying if I say that doesn't cross my mind. Sometimes I think, am I going to end up in front of, on the front page of the Orlando Sentinel? You know?
Yeah.
But ultimately, I can't let that dictate my decisions, right? I took an oath to be, to rule without fear or without favor and to follow the law. And I wouldn't be taking this job if I was afraid of that or criticism. So yeah, it enters my mind, but I put it to the side. And
Extremely tough job, and I think that does for all judges who've sat in that division. And to you, because Judge John Beamer sits in a criminal division, how many domestic violence cases where charges have been filed, and you see the rap sheet of the defendant in this case, and there are numerous domestic violence charges previously that have been dropped, and then the one in front of you is dropped. How often does that happen, and why?
I've seen it happen more frequently than not. Why that happens, I don't know. There are a variety of reasons why prosecutors don't go forward on cases, because they have an obligation to go forward on cases where they believe and have a good faith basis to prove a case beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt. Sometimes, you know, it goes back to kind of that cycle of violence and that power and control. Somebody makes a complaint, and now I'm no longer a cooperating witness. I do not want to come to court. I'm not going to testify, and now the state cannot move forward on those cases, and so they'll drop them. And when he says, rap sheet, you get something called a score sheet. If somebody gets convicted or if they enter a plea, you can see their history of cases that they've had convictions on, and then you also know about the ones that have been dropped in the past and completely dismissed. But it's not. I wish it was uncommon, but it certainly isn't.
But the victim refuses to testify. It's hard for a prosecutor to prove that case without his or her testimony. And Judge Beamer's looking at the police report, and at the scene, she had a black eye or a cut. So that happens, and it all relates to this, okay? Fantastic topic today. Can you please help me in thanking judges? And we sincerely hope to see you next week, next Tuesday, a week from today. Judge Sanders Morency from Osceola County will be speaking to us about county criminal court. Everyone have a nice evening, okay?